If you're on YouTube and you're wondering, the title does not match the thing on the screen. Don't worry, we'll get there. I'm not going to read this article. I just want to point out a few things before we get to the point. Stop calling women females. Not because of these reasons, not because of these reasons. It's this one right here. Because it is most often used to imply inferiority and contempt. Not always, but often. And it's typically when female is used as a noun, i.e., females are the worst. Here's a fun exercise: search the word females on Twitter. Okay, yeah, this is actually going to work a little bit better now because it's been better. Women have been treated a little bit better. Um, but I'm sure when this was written, 2015, yeah, it would have been horrible on Twitter. Um, in my experience and the experience of many, many other women, the vast majority of people use females refer to a group of women who are expressing dislike, no matter how faint of a group they consider a species. But because this connotation is socially constructed rather than inherent to the meaning of the word, it often goes unnoticed. Most people can understand why a woman want to be referred to as a bitch, whether or not they agree that the word is offensive. But to admit that the usage of female presents a problem requires that you trust women in their assessment of a particular interaction, that you are interested in how women feel about context and delivery of this word. Again, it's not the word, it's the intent, and you're going to hear that argument a lot. So there has been a massive debate. Sorry, wrong one. There has been a massive debate over trans women, and a lot of it is the erasure of women's sports or whatever, like some dumb shit. I already covered that earlier about how cancel culture and that shit doesn't exist. Don't. I'm not feeding into that. Here's why I have the opinion that trans people should just be a people, and why I don't understand the negativity towards them. I can get it. Don't even get me wrong there. I can understand it. It's ingrained in our culture. There have been certain slurs that have been thrown around. We covered that on the show earlier. There are certain like connotations that have been thrown around. I can understand that. I come from a black household. Like I had that experience already of like my dad. Like he's gotten better, way better over the past couple decades. But like the whole, oh, that's a T word, I couldn't fuck with a guy who pretends to be a woman. Like I've already seen that. I've seen it in the media, blah blah blah, all the informed opinions. I used to have that opinion. That's not a joke. Anyway, sorry guys. I'm talking to you. My dad calls my stream the television show. He thinks I'm on television. I fuck with it. I'm on television. Hey. I'm on a this is a this is a local broadcast. I'm on MNN. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting away from the point. Trans people have gone through a lot in American history, and I'm sticking to American history because I am not well versed in foreign affairs. Fair. This is not a YouTube video. This is not me putting the resources together. This is me off the top of my head. I would feel as though if trans people were a real problem, then you would have to address the problems and not the people. So let's walk down this for a second and then we'll get to the ultimate goal. I will tell you the ultimate goal first and then we'll walk back up because I think that makes more sense. The ultimate goal is to have trans people represented and protected as a part of society's class structure as opposed to this one random ass spinoff that we should just ignore because they're a mental illness and they need help and blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. The ultimate goal for me in understanding would have to be including them in society and not categorizing them as something other, because that would be a positive benefit towards that group as a whole and therefore would not lead to any further animosity between social classes and constructs. I would not want to be on the other side of that and start demeaning or denying the existence of trans people because that wouldn't add to a better it would literally be just like, okay, you had your fun in the sun, now back down into the gutters you go. Like the same argument with gay people, same like the LGBTQ community, like that whole argument has happened repeatedly with every single, like they said the same thing about lesbians. Oh, the more women that are gay, you're gonna erase women because you know you guys aren't having babies, so you're gonna like you're ruining the. And they said the same thing with gay men. Like it's that argument is done. But that would be that the altruistic goal is to just have them as a piece of society as opposed to a a a need for them to be validated. How so? Well, let's talk about women's sports. I already showed you an article where a cisgendered woman, girl, beat boys to become a national champion. And while that is only one example, and that would be a straw man's argument, to me, however, it does show that, like, in certain aspects, women can perform better than men. Like, the comparisons in sports are done on two levels. If you're talking about the highest class athletes, we're gonna have the Serena Williams as the number one player versus the that 200th ranked guy, and like he destroyed her or whatever. Different aspect. You're talking about the top tier competitive sports players there. Serena Williams can probably be anybody at the hobby court. So could LeBron James in a pickup game. To consider sports on that range, you're saying that trans people would throw that off in some way, form, or fashion? No, it would just be human beings who compete. Like if you really want to have that argument, but on the other end of that argument, the next rung would be the erasure of womanhood completely. So I will again ask you, the audience, what do you think a woman is? If you list to me the things that women can do, then I'm going to say to you, what about the women who are born or who are unable to do all of the functions that you claim that makes a woman? Usually that ends up nowhere. So that is an obstacle that we have to beat. So let's go up a rung. It is generally accepted, or is generally accepted to have this conversation surrounding trans women. It is not generally accepted to have this conversation around trans men. There is a reason for that I refuse to talk about on the stream right now because that's like an hour-long debate on the identity of social constructs. Like, okay, maybe I could throw in like maybe 5 seconds worth of it. Okay, it is easier to see a trans man as a man because it is easier to present as a man, and a man will have less circumstances in which a man will put himself in. Like, let's say I was a trans man. I can't do that because that's dishonest. Okay, we need a trans man walks into a bar, so we're just calling him a man there. Trans man walks into a bar. Man walks into a bar, hangs out with another man. The other guy's not gay. Those two have zero chance of hooking up. So there's no crisscross in the man's mind about what gender it is. So a straight man now walks into a bar and finds a very nice lady. The lady happens to be a trans woman. He doesn't know that. You see the difference? I don't even have to tell you the interaction. You feel it because it's generally socially talked about in that form. Like, you can say that the reaction of a gay man to approach a trans man is a lot different than a straight man approaching a trans woman. So the argument now becomes, are we talking about genitals? Are we talking about function in society? Are we talking about womanhood? Are we talking about manhood? When you layer those three steps I've just listed out for you, and you start to get into the nuance of each one of those, you realize that a lot of the hate towards the trans community is built out of the literal social constructs that you're trying to demolish. You uphold those because your friends, your fellas, your peoples, they also don't have that worldview understanding. So it gets muddled. You don't want to lose your friends, but like you shouldn't care. Which leads me to to gravitate all three of these points and just tell you straight up, stop caring about what's in other people's pants. Like that's it. Because if it's that important to you, you don't have to date them. I think that a lot of people are hearing, like, oh, if you wouldn't date a trans person, then you're transphobic. Having a preference is one thing. Saying you won't date someone because of who they are is another. Same thing with, and I know that that conversation is different, but it relates to it. It's the same thing as, it's not that I don't like black people, I just would never date one. The precognitive bias for you to get to that conclusion is my problem. Everything in your preference is not a problem. It's how you get there that makes you make these assumptions like, oh, I would never date a black man. Why? Why? I would never date a Hispanic woman. Why? Oh, that's just not my preference. Generally their family is like this and this is the that, and I don't see myself in that type of future. Oh, those are okay, now we're talking about legitimate reasons. But could you meet somebody that could break that stereotype for you? Oh, absolutely. Okay, then that's a preference. I don't care about that. Nobody is asking you or forcing you to see trans women as prospectable date partners. That's not it. If that's not the avenue of a relationship that you see yourself in, that's fine. But just outwardly saying I would never do it for the reason of just because they exist that way, and that I don't agree with that or whatever, like, that's transphobic. And it sucks because you get called that and you go on the defensive instead of just taking a look and saying, well, why would somebody say that about me? And I hate using myself as a personal example for any of these things, but there's a reason why. I wonder how you could ever, like, not have a good faith argument against that. Because, like, I would never say that. That's why nobody ever calls me that. Is it a good thing? Is that virtue signaling? No. I just don't have that much hate in my heart to slice off an entire population just because they exist that way. Would I ever date a gay would I ever date a gay man? No, I do not identify as gay. That's fine. But I'm not gonna walk into a gay bar and then get mad that men are hitting on me. Like, I set myself up for that. Like, you you create these imaginary circumstances, which goes into the whole imaginary circumstance thing about, oh, what if a man dresses up as a woman and then goes into the women's bathroom and assaults my daughter? Okay, is that them being trans or them being weird? Steven Crowder just did the thing. Like, is that being trans or is that being performative and weird for the sake of your own sick ass desires? Like, you conflate these issues around trans people because you do not understand it. And I'm not asking you to sit down and read a freaking book. Just talk to a trans person. And all that, you're going to be talking to a normal ass human being. And you're gonna be like, oh, okay. It's not about the outward reflection of you on society. It's about my inward reflection on how I receive said information about you and how I should change the conversational dialogues that we have in these circles. And people refuse to do that. So I'm gonna title this video, Trans People Shouldn't Exist. Because the acknowledging the existence is something that we can't do. So therefore trans people do not exist. They are just people with a different lifestyle than you that for some reason that one specific thing triggers you. It's the same thing as I would never let my daughter date a black guy. What, like, where did that cutoff point come to? How did you get there? You did not come out the womb spitting that shit. So somebody taught it to you somewhere. You read it in a book. You read it online. You watched it in a, let's have a wraparound conversation. You watched it in a cartoon. Oh, it's not natural. Yeah, but neither is telling your kids at age 8, oh, it's so cute that you have a girlfriend. And a gay grow up to be gay and can't figure out why his parents were still pushing fucking girls in his face. Lil Boosie, I'll buy my 14-year-old son a hooker. He ain't never gonna be on that gay shit. And now look, the kid done killed himself, and wow, now we have a national tragedy. Because your perception of Earth is like so limited to what you've seen. And I really like it, that's why it's dumb for me to have this conversation. It's dumb for me to say I validate trans people's existences because there's nothing for me to validate. They just exist. That's it. Like that's it. That, I don't want to like. It's the same thing with women's rights. And I said women's rights shouldn't exist because what are you arguing there? What are you saying with that sentence? Women should have more rights. That's right. And it's like, so why don't we just do that? Like, you want to go to Mars, but you can't figure this out first. God forbid an alien come from and it looks something humanoid or whatever. Alien lives matter. Like you cannot do this over and over again. I refuse to have this conversation over and over again. Like I I I cannot in good faith have that. Like I don't know, am I virtue signaling? Like I just don't see myself or any rational human being throwing a hissy fit because somebody wants to transition. That I wouldn't even know that person existed if you didn't bring it up in the media. Like yo, I don't like having to carve out new avenues for people who have already and always been oppressed. Like that's it. The system was built for white men. More countries outside built the systems for white men. Whoever was in power, whoever was dominating at that time, built it for a certain group of people. And now more people have moved in, more people have immigrated, more people have migrated, and now you just got to update it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Update your thinking, update your rationale. I'm not asking you to go out there and be like, yeah, I love trans women. I only date trans women. I'm not asking you to do that. Just give them respect. Give them respect. You out here calling them F slurs and this, give them respect. Where's the, if you can't have a reasonable outlook on this that doesn't demean the other people, then you can't be at the table on the conversation because the compromise between 0 and 100 is 50, and that leaves out half of the population. Like at the end of the day, it's like it's all or none. Your preconceived biases about what could or could not happen in societies that don't allow this shit, period. So however you're getting there is not working with me right now. It's just not. You talk out of your ass. Like, I don't know how to say it any other way. You talk out of your ass to create this scenario that makes you feel like you're being righteous for negating anything that goes against God's will or whatever preconceived notion that you have. And I'm asking you, why would you want to live in a place like, for you to say, I don't have any problem with it, I just don't want it forced upon me? How do you think gay people feel when they get underrepresented or represented as the whiny stereotype? I'm gay. Like, do you not know where that came from? Or are you being, this is why I always say this, either you're doing this on purpose, you're willingly being ignorant, or you have so many gaps in your social panorama that maybe somehow you've missed this, and because you've missed it, it makes you feel bad for being called out on it. Because you have been so good, you don't have that hate in your heart generally. It's just when the subject comes up. But the funny part is that I know for a lot of people who are transphobic, they've been in trans women's DMs. Some of y'all have been dating them on the side, not telling your friends, being closeted about it. Interesting, because if you made it normalized, then your friends would have no choice but to make it normalized, which would make it more normalized, which would eliminate the stigma that you're afraid of in the first place. So, in effect, you are creating your own paranoia. So, if I could take every situation and put it down there because humans can just wake up the next day and change the whole shit if they wanted to, because you have the ability to think, therefore you are, if you want to get philosophical about it, creating the maximum good over the idea of economic and social constructed system to uplift all of humanity, you are either willing to exclude a group, willing to execute a group, willing to straight up euthanize a group, genocide, because they don't agree with what? The views that you've been taught, the views that you understand. But if we are to evolve above that to be ready to go to other planets and spread the human dream, how do we explain that? How do we explain that to homogenized cultures galaxies away who are like, you guys have problems with trans people? We got AI, like, we have android robot people who also exist, and like, we didn't have to grant them rights to liberty. Like, they said they don't want to be in servitude. More people should play Detroit Become Human. Like, just honestly, like, it's a great analogy for every oppressed race. It's a great analogy. But anyway, yeah, me having to validate a trans person's existence is dumb because I'm working from your standpoint to get you to come back here. But if I am here and you are here, there can be no compromise because what am I going to do? Let's say I'm in a debate with somebody, 1v1, you in a debate with somebody, it's 1v1, you at a shipment, you snipers only, and like one person says, "You go melee, I'll go sniper." I'm like, that's not fair at all. I mean, I'd have to get up close to you. You can just snipe me across the map. Okay, so let's compromise. Their compromise in terms of this conversation would be effectively saying, I'll still use the sniper and you'll still use the hands, but we'll only go in the middle. Like, I'm still at a severe disadvantage and you think you've done something. So now when you continuously kill me over and over, it's your fault. You're not good enough. Maybe if you weren't so concerned with, sliding and doing all this and doing all that, you would actually land a blow on me. Like, you can kill me in one shot. It takes me 3 to knock you down. Like, what are we talking about? Can I at least get a knife? Can I get a melee weapon? None of that. What is the compromise between the oppressor and the oppressed? If there was an idea to compromise this idea between two groups of people, then it wouldn't need to exist in the first place. It's like, yo, I cannot bring this and I cannot stress this to you enough. Please stop invalidating trans people's existence. Just stop it. Just stop. Just stop it. It's over. As one of my as one of the great bands I listened to when I was a kid, Circa Survive once said, congratulations. Go home now. Fucking stupid.